To me, the crisp clinking of champagne glasses sounded like a death knell, signaling the collapse of an entire ecosystem. I sat in the deepest shadows at the very edge of the five-star hotel's banquet hall, watching Zhang Hai under the spotlight with a cold, detached gaze. He wore a sharply tailored Armani haute couture suit, standing right in front of the microphone. Below the stage, a crowd of investors was talking big, exchanging boastful laughs. The giant LE screen flashed with blinding gold letters on a red background. Lin Cong, Fresh Series A. Financing, Restructuring, and Strategic Upgrade Celebration Banquet. The name Lin Cong used to represent us 2 or 3 years ago. Back then, it was just a beat-up pickup truck. Few greenhouses in the suburbs. Meet me doing the hard work of conditioning the soil from the ground up. Using the most primitive, yet demanding micro-ecological symbiotic technology, I grew the sweetest and most flavorful tomatoes in the city. Meanwhile, he was in charge of building retail channels and managing capital operations. In just 3 years, Lin Cong Fresh became the largest supermarket chain in the city. And now, as the slides on the PPT presentation flipped, I knew that Con, the part of the company name that represented me, had been completely erased. On the stage, Zhang Hai waved his arms excitedly, painting a grand, alluring blueprint for the investors. He claimed, bluntly, without hesitation, traditional farming with your back to the sun and face to the dirt is just an inefficient burden. Going forward, Lin Cong's core competitiveness will completely shift to capital matrices and fully industrialized supply chains. To prove his point, he grandly introduced a highly paid agricultural expert back from overseas, Dr. Niu Yu. Watching that slicked-back-haired, gold-rimmed glasses-wearing expert show off his hydroponic techniques and precision fertilizer crop-boosting models on stage, I could only mock him with a sad, silent laugh. The screen was full of nutrient solution ratios, soilless cultivation yield curves, and growth regulator intervention plans, all wrapped up in fancy, overhyped buzzwords. In their eyes, plants are just industrial products on an assembly line. As long as you inject a set amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, you can squeeze out profits like toothpaste. They don't understand at all that without microbacterial communities, plants can never synthesize those complex aromatic compounds, inhibitants, and secondary metabolites. They'll even lose the basic ability of their cell walls to retain water. But the capital, where turnover rates are everything, flavor and vitality are completely worthless. What Zhang Hai wants is a highly standardized appearance and an absolutely controlled growth cycle, all to chase off the charts yields. Taking advantage of this financing and restructuring, Shanghai Unilaterally announced a scheme to forcibly dilute my shares. In his own words, a mud-loving amateur who only knows how to play with dirt is no longer worthy of the company's grand vision to list on NASDAQ. During the banquet's intermission, I was summoned to the top-floor VIP conference room to receive my buyout package. Across the conference table, Zhang Hai leaned back in his leather executive chair, puffing on a cigar. His eyes were filled with pity, the kind you have for a complete loser. Oh, Lin, we started this business together as brothers. Good blame me for being heartless now. But your shares have to make way for real capital. His wife Li Xiao, who also served as the company's CFO, slid a thin bank card across the table toward me. Her gaudy nails tapped out an impatient rhythm on the table. Beside her, the newly appointed purchasing manager, who was also my brother-in-law Li Chang, looked at me with an undisguised sneer. He tossed a crumpled manila envelope right next to my hand. Here is 100,000 yuan. Plus a 30-acre abandoned orchard on the east side of town. This was my entire payoff, the grand reward for building half of Lin Cong's empire with my own technology. I sat there, listening to the husband and wife tag-teaming my doom. Li Xiao bitterly warned me to take the 100,000 yuan and get lost before our legal department sued me for low productivity. Zhang Hai put on a charitable act, pretending that useless orchard was some kind of generous lifeline he left for me, telling me to go play my little games somewhere else. I didn't even bother to argue. An abandoned orchard on the east side of town. Everyone in the local agricultural community knew about it. It was once the site of a chemical plant and an illegal battery factory. Later, shady contractors dumped toxic chemical waste, leaving the soil heavily contaminated with pesticides and heavy metals. The soil was completely dead and petrified. Forget about growing crops. Even the toughest weeds couldn't survive there. It was literally a dead zone. A liability that required paying annual environmental maintenance fees. Zhang Hai throwing this toxic wasteland at me was the ultimate insult to my career as an agricultural specialist. He wanted me to fail utterly on a patch of land where absolutely nothing could grow. To prove his ruthless corporate logic was absolute. But I didn't lose my temper like they expected. I calmly pulled out my pen and signed the stock buyout and resignation agreement. The soft scratch of my pen was the only sound in the dead silent conference room. I picked up the bank card and the land deed and stood up, completely ignoring their stunned stares. I walked straight out the door. The moment the door clicked shut, I completely erased Lin Cong Fresh from my mind. 2 in the morning. The abandoned orchard, on the outskirts of the East District. A freezing night wind, thick with the stench of sulfur and metallic rust, swept violently across the 30-acre wasteland. Under the pale moonlight, not a single speck of green could be seen. There were only massive patches of grayish-white salt crusts and soil as hard as concrete. A few dead fruit trees planted years ago stood like twisted skeletons in the wind. There wasn't even the sound of a single insect. Even the faint, earthy scent of living microbes was completely absent. I carried my black plastic case and set it down on the rock-hard ground. This was the only personal item I had taken from the Lin Cong lab. I assembled a titanium alloy probe and boot up the high-precision portable soil microecology analyzer, a device I personally modified. With a high-frequency vibration, it struggles to drill through the rock-hard topsoil. It extracts core soil profiles from 15 centimeters underground, 30 centimeters and 50 centimeters deep, capturing soil profiles from 3 critical layers. After placing them into the sample slot, I start up the microcurrent detection and spectral analysis. Moments later, the analyzer's screen lights up in the darkness, casting a faint blue glow. Rows of red alarm data cascade down like a waterfall. pH value, 3.61. An extremely acidic and highly corrosive environment. EC value, soluble salt concentration too chaotic to calibrate. Ion channels completely blocked. Free state heavy metal residues and toxicity exceed the standard by 410%. Lead levels exceed by 650%. DDT levels exceed the limit by 1,200%. Organic matter content is at 0.008%. Physically extreme desertification. Microecological activity index, 0.00. Absolute death. Not a single active aerobic or anaerobic colony detected. Any ordinary agriculture student looking at this data would immediately declare this land dead. The heavy metal ions act like nanoscale locks, tightly sealing off every single nutrient exchange channel in the soil. To restore soil fertility through conventional means, it would either take over 100 years or require an investment of tens of millions of dollars for chemical soil replacement. I stare at those glaring, blood-red numbers on the screen. Absolute despair. Yet, in this deathly silent wilderness, the corners of my mouth slowly curl into a smirk. Finally, I let out a low, cold laugh. That idiot, Gang Hai, actually thought he could tie my hands with a piece of toxic land. The so-called experts around him only know how to measure everything by textbook standards. But what ordinary people see as toxic wasteland is, in my microscopic world, a priceless treasure. In normal farmland, the biggest obstacle to building a high-dimensional microecological matrix is the tens of billions of wild, native microbes already in the soil. They occupy an inherent, stubborn ecological niche and will ruthlessly attack any beneficial, specialized microbes I try to introduce to suppress those wild microbes. It usually takes an immense amount of computing power and time to balance the ecosystem. This land right here? The chemical plant's toxic runoff and heavy metal contamination have already carried out a complete, literal sterilization for me. It has wiped out every single native microbe, completely formatting this land's ecosystem. This is no longer a wasteland. It is a blank canvas, wiped spotlessly clean. A vast, natural, competitor-free, super sterile petri dish. All I need is a spark that can survive in this living hell. I open the hidden compartment at the bottom of my plastic case, enter the passcode, and pull out a liquid nitrogen cryotube. With a soft hiss from the valve, white, freezing mist spills out, revealing a heavy-duty glass test tube lying quietly inside. Floating within it is an inconspicuous, faint blue flocculent substance. This is my ultimate trump card. My ultimate tool to dominate microecology? The primitive spores of a devouring, metal-eating fungus. In just 2 days, the bank card containing 100,000 yuan was drained down to a double-digit balance. I didn't hire a single worker. Nor did I buy traditional tillers or fertilizers. Inside this run-down brick shack, I set up a crude but highly advanced micro-command center. Every penny of it went into buying second-hand, high-frequency spectral analyzers, handy microcurrent sensors, hundreds of peristaltic pumps, and 3 sets of computing arrays connected to cloud servers. The dead, barren look of this orchard is just a cover. The real war is raging 30 centimeters beneath the surface. In the microscopic world, ordinary people can't even begin to imagine how brutal it is. Heavy metals left behind by the chemical plant and ionic pesticide secondary metabolites have made this soil their home for decades. They long ago fused with the few surviving mutated, harmful pathogens, forming an unbreakable, toxic symbiosis. When I injected that vial of compartmentalized Genesis fungal spore into the soil as my vanguard, a microscopic meat grinder of a battle was instantly unleashed. For 5 days and 5 nights straight, I barely closed my eyes, surviving on boxes of stale, dry bread and high-concentration caffeine to maintain an absolute state of hyper-focus. The real-time microecological monitoring map on the screen was like boiling magma. The red and blue data streams were furiously slaughtering those toxic heavy metal ions like razor-sharp nanoblades, constantly tearing through the cell walls of the Genesis fungi. Even the mutated spores I spent 5 years cultivating under extreme pressure suffered devastating casualties in the initial phase. Alarms triggered by the monitoring probes echoed endlessly in my cramped room. Warning: pH level at matrix node 04 has plummeted below 3.2. The highly acidic environment is causing a massive collapse of the mycelial network. Warning: localized cadmium ion concentration at matrix node 12 is overloaded. The intracellular chelation reaction is approaching its threshold. But fighting back won't be that easy. I stared intently at the screen, my eyes bloodshot and terrifying. My hands blurred across the keyboard. I am not farming. I am controlling the laws of physics in a microscopic universe. The rate of fungal reproduction in fission is directly linked to the environment's electrical conductivity, the EC level, as well as its pH and salinity. A deviation of just 0.01 in any single parameter would cause billions of beneficial fungi to instantly dissolve themselves. I immediately cut off the system's automatic regulation and switched to full manual high-stakes micromanagement. Using the capillary network buried deep underground, I began precisely injecting various concentrations of organic acid buffers and antagonistic electrolytes. For node 04, I added a 0.015 molar calcium carbonate suspension at a flow rate of 3 milliliters per minute for 15 minutes. At node 12, I boosted the local microcurrent to alter the charge, forcing the ions to drop their electron transition orbitals, reducing their free activity. This was an extreme, tightrope walking act of precision control. Under my intervention, the near-collapsing Genesis fungal colony finally stabilized. They began secreting massive amounts of specialized enzymes, shattering the compacted saline calcali soil blocks. Like countless miniature boring machines, they greedily devoured the heavy metal ions, converting them into highly stable, inert crystals within their cells. And those stubborn pesticide residues were broken down by the fungi into basic carbohydrates. By the dawn of the 7th day, the chaotic flashing streams of data finally start to level out. The warning red glow on the screen slowly fades away. In its place is a deep, vibrant green grid representing life and perfect balance. Pickers the door open. I stumble my way to the center of the orchard, barely holding myself up. The first light of dawn is just breaking. I collapse onto my knees. I dig both hands deep into the soil that was once rock hard. A miracle has happened. Those grayish-white patches of barren, alkaline sart are completely gone. In their place is a rich, dark brown soil, incredibly soft, aerated, and full of life. I scoop up a handful. The sharp, toxic stench of sulfur is gone. Instead, there's a rich, intoxicating scent of fresh earth, pulsing with the raw rhythm of new life. My super fungi didn't just survive. They staged a massive comeback. They turned this dead wasteland into a flawless, sterile micro-ecosystem, a perfect cultivation sanctuary. Slumping onto the ground, I look at my hands, covered in dark, fertile mud. A wild, manic grin spreads across my face. Phase 1 of the soil regeneration is complete. Dragging my exhausted body back inside, I pick up my freshly charged phone. The moment the screen lights up, a flood of breaking news alerts explodes onto my screen. Almost all of them are about Zhonghe. Taikong Fresh secures 200 million won in Series B funding. Announces 30 new chain stores opening this month. The unstoppable rise of a fresh produce empire. Dr. Liu Yu takes you inside Taikong's fully automated, soilless cultivation base. In the video, Zhonghe is dressed to the nines, bragging to the camera about his massive business empire. And then the camera cuts to Liu Yu's greenhouse. Looking as sterile as a high-tech lab, row after row of vegetables are bathed under blinding grow lights, soaking in a continuous flow of chemical nutrients. They're growing at a terrifying speed and look absolutely flawless. Just as I'm about to lock my phone, the deep, heavy roar of car engines rumbles from outside. A low-slung Maybach and a Mercedes SUV aggressively plow through the muddy path leading to my orchard and screech to a halt right outside the rusty iron gate. The doors swing open, and out steps a group of flashy, well-dressed people. Leading the pack is none other than Zhonghe. Right beside him is Liu Yu, that smug Ivy League expert, strutting with his chin held high as usual. It looks like they're surveying the surrounding land today and just happened to pass by. I don't even bother changing my clothes. I was still wearing my overalls, splattered with mud and smelling of sour fermentation. I walked up to the iron gate, my face completely blank. Zhonghe sized me up from the other side of the gate. His eyes were filled with undisguised pity and mockery. He started throwing around some cheap, nasty comments about my current situation. Basically, he was gloating about how our former star engineer had ended up digging for food in a toxic wasteland, like some kind of raving lunatic. He even whipped out a business card, handing it over like charity, saying that if I was really starving to death, I could always work as a stock boy at his new store. I didn't even bother to answer him. My gaze went right past him and landed on Liu Yu, who was holding a handkerchief over his face with pure disgust. Liu Yu clearly sneered at my backward peasant-like ways. Pointing at the soil behind me, he started lecturing me in a pompous textbook tone. Soil polluted with heavy metals to this degree is an irreversible dead end in modern phytoremediation theory. He mocked my attempt to fight modern industrial chemistry with a few cheap sensors and ridiculous primitive methods. During his endless lecture, it felt like a swarm of annoying flies buzzing in my ear. Dr. Liu, I finally spoke up. My hoarse voice sounded like two pieces of dry bark scraping together, cutting off his endless rambling. I didn't debate his theories. Instead, I rattled off a string of data with cold, absolute precision. Under extreme stress where copper ions exceed the limit by 400 times, using high-frequency microcurrents to intervene in the bacteria, the instantaneous reproduction fission rate of XR7 can reach 2.4 times 10 to the 6th power per second. Meanwhile, the intracellular chelation reaction converts highly toxic free peptides into stable crystals with an efficiency of 99.97%. As long as the EC value is dynamically anchored at 2.15 and the pH value is locked at 6.402, think constructing the foundation of the microecological matrix will only take 120 hours. Lu Yu's hand, still covering his nose, froze in midair. Behind his glasses, his pupils shrunk in shock. The arrogance drained from his face, replaced by total disbelief and confusion. This data completely shattered the boundaries of modern science. Real-time data, accurate to 3 decimal places. It was like another language to him. I didn't give him a second to process it. My cold eyes swept down to the faint yellowish chemical powder, dusting the edge of his leather shoes. By the way, I said, staring him dead in the eye. My tone was as cold as a judge delivering a death sentence. To chase rapid growth rates, your closed nutrient solution recycling system has a dangerously high nitrogen ratio. You think physical sterilization solves everything? In a pure hydroponic setup lacking competitive beneficial bacteria, even the tiniest spore leak in your system will trigger a total wipeout. After that, I ignored the priceless looks on their faces. I turned on my heel and walked straight back into my dark monitoring room. Outside, a humiliated Zhang Hai spat out. "Chish, stubborn bastard, still talking tough." Then, the engine roared back to life. The cars sped off, leaving nothing but a cloud of dust. I sit back in front of the screen, staring at the fully activated pollution monitoring map, absorbing everything like a perfect black sponge. All the arguments and mockery? Completely meaningless now. The stage is set. I take out the first batch of premium Provence tomato and mini cucumber seeds from the incubator, wrapped in microecological membranes. The real crushing blow starts right now. In the macro world, half a month is just the blink of an eye. But in the microecological matrix I built, it's more than enough for a microscopic civilization to undergo thousands of iterations. The soil layer 30 centimeters beneath the abandoned orchard has transformed into a massive, precisely operating biomatrix. Those highly toxic heavy metal residues have been converted by specialized fungi into stable, inert complexes. They form an incredibly solid microscopic skeleton. And between these skeletal structures, the tens of billions of beneficial symbiotic networks act like a bustling logistics highway, tirelessly delivering free trace elements, minerals, and cracked carbohydrates straight to the plant's roots with pinpoint accuracy. I didn't build a single square meter of greenhouse, and I didn't use a single drop of chemical nutrient solution. Right here, on this once barren, lifeless wasteland, the first batch of Provence tomatoes and mini cucumbers I planted broke every rule of traditional agriculture, exploding with growth. It's a terrifying yet breathtakingly perfect display of raw vitality. Under ordinary cultivation conditions, the grown plants are usually thin and weak, with pale green leaves starved of chlorophyll, looking just like ICU patients clinging to life on 4 drips. But the plants right in front of me, their vines are as thick and sturdy as coiled bronze cables, with their surfaces covered in a tough, dark, protective fibrous layer. The deep green leaves are thick and broad. The veins are as sharp and clear as a precision circuit board. Even the tiny fuzz on the leaves glistens under the sun with a healthy, glossy sheen. Any pests or diseases? Not a single one, because the unique secondary metabolites rising from the matrix soil have created a natural bioshield over the orchard. Any pest trying to get close is driven away instantly by its survival instincts. By the morning of the 15th day, the first batch of fruit has ripened. I pluck a Provence tomato. It doesn't have that dull, artificially uniform red of chemically ripened produce. Instead, it glows from within like a top-tier pigeon blood ruby, with a perfectly symmetrical star-like pattern blooming right at the stem. Its skin is taut, bursting with incredible tension. Just holding it in my hand, the pure, rich, earthy aroma washes over me like a physical wave, filling my senses. This is no longer just produce. It's a flawless biological masterpiece, born from the microecological system. I pick a few tomatoes and some crisp, vibrant green cucumbers and toss them into a cheap black plastic bag. I drove straight to the Provincial Agricultural Product Quality and Safety Testing Center. This place houses the most advanced precision testing equipment in the entire province and all of East China. The receptionist at the front desk took one look at my shabby clothes and the dirty, mud-stained plastic bag in my hand. A flash of pure, undisguised disdain crossed her eyes. People like her. The samples brought in here are usually beautifully packaged products from massive agricultural conglomerates, or sterile tubes from top-tier research institutes. Just a standard blind test, right? That will be 2,000 yuan. Leave your sample there. You can check the results on our official website in 5 business days. The technician picked up my tomato with a pair of tweezers and tossed it carelessly into the sample processing bin, without even giving it a second glance. Without saying a word, I swiped my card, took the barcode receipt, and turned to walk out of the reception hall. But I didn't actually leave the building. Instead, I slipped around to the ventilation shafts at the back of the building, silently counting down the minutes. Exactly 1 hour later, the core laboratory of this testing center was about to experience a massive earthquake, and my predictions were absolutely flawless. Upstairs, inside the second floor core lab, in front of a multi-million-dollar UPLC-MS/MS system. The technician, who had been completely indifferent just moments ago, was now staring wide-eyed at the screen. He had completely stopped breathing. On the monitor of the mass spectrometer, the substance detection curve, which should have been gently rising and falling, suddenly shot straight up like a raging bull, just 3 minutes after the sample was injected. Beep, beep, beep. A deafening alarm for abnormal peaks echoed through the entire cleanroom. Red warning lights flashed frantically, screaming that the instrument's detection limit had been instantly shattered. What on earth is going on? Is the detector contaminated? Or is the pump pressure failing? Sweating profusely, the technician frantically cut off the flow path and began inspecting the equipment. But after ruling out every single mechanical failure, he grit his teeth, diluted the tomato extract by a factor of 100, and ran the test again. 10 minutes later, the alarm screamed hysterically once more. The technician's face turned completely pale. With trembling hands, he performed a third, incredibly rigorous calibration and test. When the final graph locked onto the screen, he violently kicked back his chair and scrambled, half falling, toward the director's office. 5 minutes later, the director of the testing center, an old, highly respected professor in the agricultural world, rushed into the lab without even putting his shoes on properly. He shoved the technician aside, almost pressing his face against the monitor. This is impossible. This is absolutely impossible. The old professor's voice trembled with sheer, utter excitement. The data on the screen didn't just beat the competition. It completely obliterated it. The total level of free amino acids, especially the flavor-defining glutamic and aspartic acids, are a whopping 7 times higher than the premium so-called luxury organic tomatoes on the market. Even the structure of the lycopene shows a highly active cis configuration that is incredibly rare in nature. And the charts for vitamin C and polyphenol antioxidants are so densely packed, they look like towering mountain peaks. But what's even more terrifying, the cucumber analysis detected an extremely high concentration of an aromatic natural metabolite. This substance doesn't just provide an incredibly crisp, refreshing taste, it also possesses powerful natural antibacterial and cell-regenerating properties. These aren't just vegetables. These are miniature, all-natural nutrition bombs. The old professor even began to wonder if he was testing some kind of purified extract from an alien plant. Where is the person who brought these in? Where did the guy who submitted these samples go? The old professor whipped around, grabbing the lab technician by the collar. He roared like a madman. He left right after paying the fee. He only left the last 4 digits of his phone number, while the entire quality control center fell into utter chaos trying to find me. I was already on the bus, heading back to the city. Having the data obliterate the competition was exactly what I expected. That report will eventually become my ultimate weapon, to tear the capital markets apart. But before that, I need to turn these fruits into actual bullets. At afternoon, carrying a bamboo basket filled with tomatoes and cucumbers, I went to Singhai Agricultural Salfale Market, the largest in the city. This place is the main distribution hub for the entire city's restaurant industry and high-end supermarkets. But the moment I walked through the market gates, I instantly sensed that something was off. Hanging every 10 meters across the entire market were banners for Lin Cong Fresh's direct sourcing partnership. Zhonghai's capital expansion was moving even faster than I had anticipated. He had already used massive funding and exclusive agreements to completely monopolize the supply channels here. I had just found an empty spot in the retail section and set down my basket when several shady-looking men in market security uniforms crowded around me. The leader, a bald man with a toothpick dangling from his mouth, let his gaze linger on my face and then down to my basket. He immediately let out a malicious sneer. So, you're Lin Cong. The gold guy spat out his toothpick and slammed his foot onto the edge of my bamboo basket. Manager Li Chang gave us specific orders. The second we see your face in any market in this city, we kick you out on sight.
Lin Fresh has blacklisted you across the entire industry. There's no spot for you here.
Wait. I looked at him calmly, completely unfazed by his pathetic provocation. I already paid my management fee. This is a legitimate business transaction. I said no, and that's final. Bald Thug had clearly received strict orders from Li Cong. Without warning, he lashed out. With a violent kick, he sent my bamboo basket crashing to the ground. Dozens of tomatoes, gleaming like rubies, and crisp green cucumbers spilled all over the ground. They got covered in the filthy mud and rotting leaves of the market floor. The surrounding vendors and buyers crowded around, pointing and whispering at me.
Not satisfied with just that, the bald thug wanted to assert his dominance even more.
He raised his heavy work boot and stomped down hard on a tomato that had rolled to his feet. He even ground his heel into it, twisting his foot. What kind of cheap trash is this? You actually dare to sell this here? Pete, go back to playing in the mud. But in the next second, the smirk froze on his face. The murmuring of the crowd instantly died down.
There was no explosion of spraying juice.
No messy splatter of crushed pulp.
The tomato, stomped so violently by that heavy boot, showed a terrifying level of resilience.
Thanks to the incredibly dense cell walls and moisture-locking power of my microecological matrix, it easily withstood the crushing pressure. It was only severely compressed. It wasn't until the bald thug twisted his foot with all his might that the skin finally split with a soft pop, revealing a tiny crack. And at that exact moment, an almost tangible, incredibly pure and rich aroma of fresh plants burst from the crack. It was an indescribable scent, like a wild cascade of nature's raw vitality. It didn't just instantly mask the market's usual stench of fish and rotting meat. It seemed alive, finding its way into everyone's noses and striking the very core of their senses.
The eyes of several veteran high-end food buyers in the crowd instantly went wide.
Their throats bobbed uncontrollably as they gulped. Even the bald thug was stunned. He instinctively lifted his foot, staring at the small smear of crystal-clear, ruby-red pulp on his sole. He couldn't comprehend how a simple tomato could possess such incredible resilience and mind-blowing fragrance. I didn't lose my temper.
In the law of the jungle, a predator never barks at ants.
I squatted down, ignoring the bald thug's dumbfounded stare, and picked up a perfectly intact tomato from the muddy puddle. I casually wiped the mud off with my sleeve. Its deep, rich red remained flawless. Standing up, I looked around this chaotic market. A place filled with petty power plays and corporate lackeys. A cold, mocking look flashed in my eyes. Holding the tomato, I turned and walked toward the exit without looking back. I left them staring at my back, too intimidated to even try to stop me. Since you want to block my access to the low-end market, then I'll make the elite crawl to me and beg on their knees. Leaving behind that rotting wet market and its petty, low-level power struggles, I didn't waste a single second. I hailed a premium ride straight to the city's ultra-wealthy financial district. Tucked away between towering skyscrapers was a secluded, quiet estate. This place was the absolute pinnacle of the culinary world, not just in this city, but the entire East China region. It was the only elite private restaurant to hold both a 3-diamond Black Pearl rating and 2 Michelin stars. If your net worth didn't have at least 10 figures, you didn't even have the right to book a table. Their obsession with ingredients borders on absolute clinical perfection. Clutching the filthy, cracked black plastic basket I dragged out of the mud, I walked right through the supplier's entrance in the back alley. Normally, the kitchen security at a place like this is tighter than a bank vault. But today, I walked in completely unnoticed. Because right now, the entire kitchen was in the middle of a total catastrophe, like a biological outbreak. The second I pushed open the heavy, soundproof steel door, a hysterical roar, accompanied by the shattering of fine porcelain, erupted from the spotless stainless steel prep station. Seized by customs? You're telling me this now? Imported French white asparagus and Hokkaido premium scallops were held for a random customs inspection? There are less than 40 minutes left before Elder Shen's dinner banquet begins. What the hell am I supposed to serve a legendary gourmet whose tongue is insured for $80 million? Should I slice up your head and steam it? The executive chef, a man with a stellar reputation in the industry and a notoriously explosive temper, was a heavy-set guy currently clutching the purchasing manager by his collar. His eyes were completely bloodshot, and from sheer, agonizing panic, the veins on his forehead bulged like writhing worm. In my view, this kitchen, which normally ran with the absolute precision of a Swiss watch, had completely collapsed. Under the crushing pressure, the cook scurried between the steaming stoves like a flock of sheep that had lost their leader, panic-stricken and clueless. Without any direction, the rich aromas of various luxury ingredients clashed, turning into a nauseating, greasy mess that only heightened the tension. I'd heard of this Elder Shen. He was a billionaire whose palate was several times more sensitive than an average person's. He could easily tell not only where a cut of beef came from, but down to the exact hour the cow was slaughtered. To him, mass-produced ingredients tasted like chewing on toxic waste from a chemical plant.
Seftong was right on the edge of a total breakdown.
He violently shoved away the pale, trembling purchasing manager, grabbing his neatly styled hair in both hands, staring in absolute despair at the completely empty main dish prep station. Without world-class ingredients to work with, all his legendary culinary skills were completely useless. Right in the middle of this suffocating, icy silence, I walked in, carrying my muddy, dripping plastic basket.
I stepped right over the shattered marble on the floor, past the frozen security guards.
And headed straight for the prep table right in front of the executive chef. Thuh! I casually tossed the plastic basket onto the ultra-expensive stainless steel counter. That dull thud echoed sharply through the dead-silent kitchen.
Chef Dong's head snapped up.
The despair in his eyes instantly vanished, replaced by sheer, blinding rage. He glared at me, taking in my mud-stained clothes that looked completely out of place in this pristine, sterile kitchen. Then his eyes flicked down to the cheap, battered plastic basket at my feet. His chest heaved violently as he roared. What trash heap did a crazy bastard like you crawl out of? Security! Where the hell is security? Throw this filthy peasant and his pile of garbage out onto the street! He lunged forward, reaching out to flip over my plastic basket. I didn't flinch, and I didn't explain. When dealing with a system glitch this hysterical, the best solution is to force reboot the motherboard. Moving faster than him, my hand slipped a razor-sharp, high-carbon steel chef's knife from the rack. Under everyone's terrified gazes, I reached into my basket and pulled out a Provence tomato, one that had just been stepped on at the farmer's market, still smeared with a trace of dirt. With a slight flick of my wrist, the blade sliced down at a perfect angle. With a faint, yet incredibly distinct tear of plant cell walls, the blade split the tomato clean in two. In that split second, time itself seemed to slow to a crawl in the kitchen. On a microscopic level, the gackles, tightly compressed by the tomato's internal microecological matrix, ruptured under the blade's weight. Highly active, aromatic compounds instantly freed themselves from the biological membranes, unleashing a dense concentration of lycopene and free amino acids. It exploded like tiny, ignited bombs. In the macroscopic world, there was no transition. A wave of pure, suffocatingly intense herbal aroma erupted from the prep table. It swept through the entire kitchen like a sensory tsunami. The scent was incredibly dominant. In less than 0.1 seconds, it completely overpowered the rich scent of A-grade Wagyu fat lingering in the air. It sliced through the heavy aroma of black truffles and complex spices like an invisible blade, piercing the olfactory senses of everyone in the room. What kind of scent was this? It didn't smell like mere food. It smelled like a primeval forest fresh after a torrential rain, carrying the raw, earthy scent of damp soil, the blazing heat of the sun, and the wild rhythm of nature's growth. This was the ultimate code of life, programmed into the plant by tens of billions of fungal interactions within the soil. The head chef's roaring voice was instantly cut short, choked back into his throat. His raised hand froze mid-air. His nostrils flared uncontrollably, greedily drinking in the aroma that made his very soul tremble. What hours? What is this? His bloodshot eyes stared fixedly at the two tomato halves on the cutting board. They shone like translucent rubies, without a single drop of excess juice escaping their perfectly sliced surfaces. Decades of professional culinary knowledge were utterly shattered in an instant. I didn't even look at him. I casually grabbed a prickly snack cucumber, brought the blade down and sliced it into perfectly even, paper-thin rounds. The moment the cucumber was sliced open, a wave of crisp, intensely cool fragrance mingled with the rich warmth of the tomato, pushing the raw vitality of nature to its absolute peak. This dish doesn't need cooking, and it doesn't need seasoning. I put down the knife and looked coldly at the head chef. Serve it to your customer. If they have even a single complaint, I will drag myself out of here. The head chef shuddered violently. His raw instincts as a master chef completely took over, wiping out all reason. He didn't even bother to wash his hands, grabbing a pair of tweezers to snatch up a single slice of tomato and a slice of cucumber. He didn't even add any of the premium rouge flowers. He just threw them straight onto a bed of crushed ice, holding the plate with an almost sacred devotion. He pulled it out, rushing toward the VIP room itself. The kitchen fell into a deathly silence. Every single person stopped what they were doing. They just stared at me, completely stunned, like they were looking at some kind of wizard who'd just cast a spell. I pulled up a stainless steel bar stool and calmly sat down. I knew the hook was set. In less than 5 minutes, a massive crash erupted from the VIP suites. It sounded like someone had flipped a table. Then came the sound of frantic, rushing footsteps. Elder Shen, the legendary, notoriously picky billionaire, didn't even have his jacket on straight. Supported by the head chef, this business tycoon who had conquered 1,000 storms stumbled headlong into the kitchen. His eyes were red, and his lips were actually trembling. He pushed past everyone and marched straight to my prep station. Staring at the remaining produce in my plastic crate, a single tear actually rolled down his cheek. This is the most primitive, raw vitality. The old man's voice shook with a reverence that bordered on worship. He had spent years bombarded by industrial artificial flavors and heavily processed farmed ingredients, and his taste buds had long been coated in a thick layer of chemical additives. But that single, completely unadorned slice of tomato, with its explosive natural amino acids and organic acids, had instantly shattered his sensory barriers, awakening a primal instinct deep within his genes for the natural world and a raw, ancestral craving for the wild. Young man, how much more of this do you have? I want all of it. Name your price. No matter how much, I, Shen, will pay for it in full. Hilder Shen tried to grab my hand in his excitement. I subtly stepped aside to dodge him. My voice remained completely flat. I'm sorry, but I don't sell retail. Head chef nearby had already devolved into utter madness. He knew exactly what this single crate of produce represented, with ingredients that could utterly crush any competition. He didn't even need to turn on the stove. He could easily secure his 2 Michelin stars, or even make a run for a third. All those so-called premium ingredients, flown in from abroad, are nothing but industrial trash compared to this single basket of dirt-covered produce. I'll buy it all! Yinlin Restaurant is willing to pay 3 times the market price. No? 5 times! An exclusive contract for everything you produce. The head chef practically threw himself over the prep station, shielding that battered plastic basket with his life, terrified that someone might steal it. I sat back on the bar stool, looking down on this Michelin chef who was usually so incredibly arrogant. A cold, mocking smirk played on my lips against the overwhelming power of my micro-ecological matrix. Even a world-class Michelin kitchen has no choice but to bow down unconditionally. 10 times, I said, calmly uttering those 2 words. The kitchen fell dead silent, followed by several sharp collective gasps. Tomatoes and cucumbers at 10 times the market price. This wasn't just buying produce anymore. They were buying gold. 10 times it is. Seth Dongri at his teeth, but there wasn't a single shred of hesitation in his eyes. As long as he could keep VIP clients like Elder Shen happy, paying 10 times the cost for ingredients was absolutely nothing. Don't be so quick to agree. I haven't even finished explaining my rules yet. I stood up, slowly, my gaze sweeping across his face like a razor-sharp blade. My farm is not governed by any standard business logic. I held up 3 fingers, announcing my non-negotiable terms in a tone that brooked no argument. First, the base price will fluctuate in real time, depending entirely on my matrix's energy consumption. You have 0 bargaining power. Second, you have no right to choose how the produce looks. Whatever misshapen crops my micro-ecological matrix yields, even if they are covered in dirt, that is exactly what you will use. If you dare to peel off even 1 millimeter of that nutrient-rich skin just for the sake of presentation, our deal is off instantly. Third, and most importantly, I do not take custom orders. Whatever my land yields during each cycle, it's exactly what your menu must feature. You are not purchasing ingredients from me. You are receiving the generous grace of nature itself. These 3 rules completely shattered the foundation of modern dining. The idea that the customer is king and the chef controls the ingredients. This was an incredibly arrogant, domineering declaration from a seller. The kitchen fell dead silent. The purchasing manager stared, his eyes wide with shock, looking at me as if I were an absolute madman. Safdong's face flushed with a mix of anger and humiliation. His chest heaved violently. This was the absolute tyrant who ruled over a 2-star Michelin kitchen. When had he ever endured this kind of humiliation? But then, he looked down at that half slice of tomato, radiating a deadly, irresistible temptation. And then, at Elder Shen, who had already completely succumbed right next to him. His very soul as a chef was screaming in absolute frenzy, telling him that he absolutely could not walk away from this miraculous calling. Sefdong gritted his teeth so hard they ground together. Every single word was squeezed out from between his teeth. Get the legal department to draft an exclusive buyout contract right now. Exactly as he said it. Not a single word is to be changed. I nodded and calmly pushed the bar stool back into place. Under the absolute blockade of capital and distribution channels,
Anhai thought he had backed me into a dead end.
but he has no idea. When a product achieves a generational leap in evolution on both a physical and biological level, so-called distribution channels are nothing but a thin sheet of paper. This is the first step of my devastating higher dimensional strike, driving a wedge deep into the very top of this city. A wedge strong enough to tear everything apart. In less than a single week, the seasonal Tasted at Yunnan restaurant became the wildest legend among the elite circles of this city, and indeed the entire East China region. Every day, I sat in my dilapidated brick house, watching the nearly groveling order sheets and feedback data sent by Yinlin's head chef on my computer screen. In my mind, I could clearly picture that high society frenzy. Those multi-billionaires who usually command the financial markets like gods. Now, for a single plate of Yinlin's daily limited edition poached greens, were throwing away their pride to bid frantically in their private boardroom chats. It was a dish that didn't even use a single drop of premium olive oil, simply blanched in plain water. Yet it was driven up to over 10,000 yuan a plate, and even then, was nearly impossible to get. In this elite circle, wealth has long ceased to be the only yardstick. The possession of extremely scarce resources is, and my vegetables precisely shattered their sense of taste, which had long been numbed by high-end synthetic flavorings and lavish gourmet dieting. Through the complex interactions of various fungal communities within the microecological matrix, the plant roots absorbed and synthesized their own metabolites, far exceeding the normal limits of the natural world. When those billionaires bit into and crunched down on those crisp, tender greens, an ultra-high concentration of free amino acids and aromatic compounds exploded in their mouths. That aggressive, raw force of nature's life energy made them completely surrender. What's even more amusing is that Chef Dong reported to me that a few obsessive biochemical fanatics in their circle actually sneaked out leftover leaves and tomato juice and sent them to top private laboratories overseas for gas chromatography analysis. They wanted to crack the secret formula behind this ultimate flavor, suspecting the Yinlin was using some kind of unknown banned additive. Looking at the reports, I found it utterly hilarious. A lifeless clinical chemical analysis could never crack a dynamic living microecological code. When their mass spectrometers spat out those despairing mountain-like peaks of unknown peptide chains and highly active antioxidants, even the lab experts would sink in a deep self-doubt. They simply couldn't comprehend. There was no secret recipe. This was an entirely independent, self-evolving ecological system I had built in the microscopic world. And just as the high society elites were driven to madness by these few vegetables, the cold front shown on the meteorological satellite map arrived over the city, right on schedule. On Wednesday night, the ground temperature plunged by 7 degrees. Standing in the orchard, I stared at the freezing numbers sent back by the temperature sensor. I cast my gaze to the other side of the city, at the automated hydroponic base Zhonghai is so proud of Ocean Breeze Green Source. My prediction was as precise as the hourglass of death itself. In my mind, a microscopic disaster is unfolding inside that massive multi-million-dollar glass greenhouse. Having lost the protection of a constant temperature, and thanks to that nutrient circulation system that forcibly spiked nitrogen levels, it instantly turned into a superhighway for pathogens, the long dormant verticillium spores. At the exact moment the plant roots developed tiny stress cracks due to the drop in temperature, launched a devastating assault, like a pack of piranhas smelling blood, with no soil to act as a buffer, and no beneficial symbiotic bacteria for defense. Those fragile roots, soaked in chemicals and as thin as tissue paper, would be ruthlessly pierced by fungal mycelium in just a few short hours. As the crops began to wilt and die, Shanghai Luyu must be in absolute panic, facing this incurable disease of industrial farming. The only solution that arrogant, foreign-educated PhD could think of was to abandon his zero-residue gimmick entirely and frantically dump high-dose, broad-spectrum fungicides and systemic pesticides straight into the circulation system. This was the height of stupidity, like drinking poison to quench thirst. These heavy-duty pesticides might temporarily suppress the verticillium outbreak and preserve the plant's bright, glossy green appearance. But those deadly chemical toxins will be pumped through the plant's vascular bundles, straight into every single leaf, deep into the cells of every single fruit. The forced introduction of heavy metals and benzene ring compounds will completely destroy the plant's already pathetic sugar-to-acid conversion process. On the outside, they look as fresh and vibrant as ever, but inside, their cells have already suffered massive rot and decay. Eating them isn't just like chewing tasteless wax. It even leaves a nauseating, bitter chemical aftertaste on the back of your tongue. The arrogance of greed has finally triggered nature's backlash, and the fuse for all of this was lit. The 5th day after the temperature drop, 2 absolute bombshells were dropped, precisely launched by the exact same person on the very same day. An online sensation with over 10 million followers, known for his brutal blind testing and savage, razor-sharp reviews, the anti-fraud food blogger, Teacher, think 2 videos at the top of his homepage. The title of the first video hit like a resounding slap in the face. The middle-class IQ tax exposed. The pesticide bomb inside the gorgeous packaging of high-end grocery giant, Ocean Breeze Green Source. In the video, Teacher held up a portable, high-precision pesticide residue tester, standing inside the most luxurious flagship store of Ocean Breeze Fresh. He randomly bought several expensive items from their premium organic line, tomatoes and hydroponic leafy greens, right in front of the camera. The reagent in the test tube instantly turned a shocking deep purple the second it touched the vegetable extract. This meant residues of organophosphates and carbamates were not only present, but practically redlining the national safety standards. Immediately after, Teacher took a bite of that flawless-looking tomato. His face instantly twisted in disgust. Without even caring about his on-camera image, spun around and spat it straight into the trash can. It looks like a work of art, but biting into it is like drinking diluted dish soap mixed with fertilizer water. Teacher raged furiously at the camera. The cell walls are completely destroyed. There's absolutely zero tomato flavor. It even makes the back of your tongue go numb.
把上咽癌张着流语，月牙视力考级必的好地道硬炸是有味。Premium fish produce.
Are you feeding pigs, or are you trying to poison us? Once this video went live, due to Lin Cong Fresh's already massive user base, it blew up instantly. The views shattered 5 million within 2 hours. But that wasn't even the most devastating part. The second video posted right after by Lao Shi, which completely shattered Lin Cong's defenses. had a completely different title. It was filled with a near fanatical reverence. A miracle descends, exploring the secrets of Yinlin private kitchen. I tasted the primal soul of nature. In the video, Lao Xiu sat in the dimly lit, luxurious private room of Yinlin. On the table sat a plate of poached choy sum and sliced tomatoes, completely identical to the samples I had given the head chef. The video didn't use any flashy editing or special effects. The camera simply captured Lao Xi's expression, freezing the exact moment he took his first bite of the tomato. His brow, which had been slightly furrowed in preparation to nitpick, completely smoothed out. His eyes actually welled with tears, right before our eyes. Known for his brutally sharp tongue, and having dined at Michelin-starred restaurants all over the world, he completely lost his composure and covered his face in front of the camera. His shoulders trembled slightly. I don't understand. I really don't understand how this was grown. Lao Shi's voice cracked with emotion. There are no seasonings to mask it, but the sheer, explosive sweetness and the rush of umami are like an atomic bomb of life force detonating inside your brain. In front of this, every premium ingredient I've ever eaten before feels like a pile of soulless carbohydrates. This isn't a victory of culinary skill at all. This is the absolute conquest of the human palate by the ingredient itself. When you compared the two videos, the difference was night and day. One was a hard-hitting exposé on toxic industrial waste loaded with pesticides, while the other featured a legendary ingredient that had foodies across the internet ready to make a pilgrimage. The jarring contrast instantly set the city's public opinion ablaze. Watching the real-time trending indices climb rapidly on my screen, I picked up my cup of cheap instant coffee and took a sip. With my precise control over the microdata, I didn't even need to be there to envision the apocalyptic scene Shanghai was facing right now. Hong Kong Fresh's customer service hotline was bound to be completely overwhelmed. The middle class and wealthy elites, who had spent tens of thousands of yuan on high-end Li One membership cards in pursuit of a premium lifestyle, would feel utterly deceived and humiliated. A massive wave of membership cancellations and refund demands would inevitably crash over the checkout counters of every Hong Kong store like a tsunami. But that's not all. Those sharp-eyed investment firms and capital backers had undoubtedly already seen the pesticide residue data in Lao Shi's first video. For a pre-IPO company that branded itself on modern agricultural technology, falsifying core product data and having a major safety scandal blow up was as good as severing its main artery. Capital is bloodthirsty and utterly ruthless. Yesterday, Shanghai was using capital to crush me. Today, he will be devoured by the very monster he raised, until there isn't even a bone left. I closed the browser pages overflowing with news and pulled up the real-time monitoring map of my orchard's underground microecological matrix. On the screen, the deep green grid representing the citywide fungal colony continues to run with eerie, steady precision. 30 centimeters beneath the surface, deep in the soil. Tens of billions of microorganisms are quietly devouring, composing and transforming to maintain the absolute balance of this micro-universe. While the world outside is in utter chaos and empires of capital are crumbling to the ground, the mastermind behind it all is just sitting here in this drafty, rundown brick shack, tapping away on a keyboard, calmly staring at this dead land, place others once tossed aside like garbage.
Shanghai, this is only the beginning.
The real terror of a dimensional strike isn't how loud it is. It's that you don't even know what dimension your opponent is attacking you from. Capital has a better sense of smell than any hound, and its betrayal is always far more real and brutal than any drama. On Thursday morning, the city's financial and agricultural sectors experienced a silent, violent earthquake. I sat in that drafty brick shack in the abandoned orchard. On the left side of my screen, the real-time three-dimensional topology map of the micro-ecological matrix ran with perfect stability. On the right was Hong Kong Fresh's valuation curve in the private equity market, a red line that had once soared like a rocket. Now, it was in a free fall, plunging vertically in a terrifying nosedive hole. This avalanche wasn't just triggered by those two devastating videos from a 10 million follower influencer.
It was a fatal backstab from Hong Kong's own core investors.
By now, the executive chef of Yinlin restaurant had become my most loyal disciple and informant. Through an encrypted chat, he gleefully and frantically gave me a play-by-play of what went down last night on the top floor of Hong Kong's headquarters. The chaos in that boardroom. Everything was going exactly as I had planned. Among the ultra-wealthy who throw money around at Yinlin restaurant, two happened to be the lead investors for Hong Kong Fresh's Series B round. After tasting vegetables at England that completely shattered their perception of flavor, their sharp instincts made them realize a terrifying truth. The fully automated, industrialized farming that Hong Kong boasted about was like a caveman's crude recipe compared to the product of this mysterious supplier. It was a total dimensional strike of modern civilization over the primitive. To make sure this wasn't just some chemical trick by the chef at Yinlin, these two ultra-cautious investors took the leftover half of a Provence tomato and a few lettuce leaves and rushed them overnight to a top-tier biotech lab they controlled. The report they got back matched my blind test results perfectly, but because their equipment was superior, The data looked downright supernatural. When that report, stamped by 3 national-level laboratories, was slammed onto Zhang Hai's expensive mahogany desk, the very foundation of Zhang Hai's proud empire crumbled in an instant. The chef described the scene to me. The investors pointed right at Zhang Hai's face, tearing him and Liu Yu to shreds with the most brutal words imaginable.
Look at these amino acid and antioxidant peaks. Then look at the toxic chemical residues from your green source base.
They're nothing but bitter, rotting industrial garbage from the inside out. The investor shoved the lab report right into Zhang Hai's pale face, roaring loud enough to shatter the glass. You call those hydroponic crops infected with verticillium wilt the future, Zhang Hai? We invested $200 million in you.
Not to have you grow damn poison! Standing to the side, Dr. Liu Yu looked as if he'd been struck by lightning the second he saw the report.
His precious Cornell degree, and those rigid textbook theories. His entire world was completely shattered by a test result that totally defied every known law of plant biology.
He stared, trembling from head to toe, at the unbelievable concentration of secondary metabolites.
He even began muttering incoherently. This is impossible. This is impossible. This violates the law of conservation of mass. But in the eyes of wealthy investors, a miracle that cannot be replicated is the ultimate competitive barrier. The investors couldn't care less about Li Yu's academic breakdown. They handed Zhang Hai a final ultimatum. Immediately stop the foolish expansion of the Green Garden base and use every single resource to secure the god-tier supplier behind Yinlin Restaurant. If they fail to secure it, the Series B funding of $200 million would be pulled immediately, and they would sue Zhang Hai personally to the absolute limit.
Overnight,
the once mighty Zhang Hai became like an ant on a hot pan, utterly frantic. As I watched the news flashing across my screen,
the city's agricultural sector, the logistics industry, and even the private investigator community went completely wild.
Zhang Hai was calling in every single favor he had,
putting up a massive bounty of 10 million yuan,
just to find a single address
and a single name. The head chef of Yinling Restaurant became his very first target.
Zhang Hai actually cornered him at the restaurant's back door, holding a briefcase crammed with cash, promising that if the chef just gave up the supplier's contact info, we would hand over 5% of Heikong Fresh's original shares on the spot. But Zhang Hai didn't understand a thing about top-tier chefs. They hold a sacred reverence for ultimate ingredients.
Head chef didn't even glance at the cash.
He just had security throw Zhang Hai out on his face.
To that chef,
the 3 strict rules I laid down weren't an insult at all. They were like sacred decrees from the god of nature itself.
He was absolutely terrified that any leak would force me to cut off his supply permanently.
So, he kept his mouth shut. No matter how hard outsiders pried, he only gave them a vague reply. They are a mysterious farm that holds the key to advanced biotechnology, and they are completely beyond the reach of corporate greed. Those words spread like wildfire, driving the city's elite into an absolute frenzy,
and driving Shanghai deeper into despair.
As this wild needle in a haystack hunt consumed the city, I sat calmly in front of my computer, tracking their moves through public bidding records and logistics data streams. I watched coldly as Zhang Hai stumbled around like a blind man trying to find his way. It was pathetic. I had absolutely no idea what microecology even meant.
That idiot, Liu Yu, had given Zhang Hai what looked like a highly scientific plan to track me down.
He stubbornly believed that any base capable of growing crops with such off-the-charts data profiles had to have massive, ultra-modern hardware. He thought it had to be a fully sealed, high-tech glass super greenhouse,
equipped with class 100,000 dust-free filtration system,
featuring massive liquid cooling climate control units and highly visible high-voltage security fences.
So Zhang Hai's team rented commercial high-resolution satellite imagery,
combined it with drone aerial photography, and launched a sweep of all high-yield farmland within a 300-kilometer radius. They conducted a dragnet search of agricultural science parks in large-scale glass greenhouses.
By comparing spectral analysis,
I hunted for modern agricultural strongholds that consumed massive amounts of electricity and showed abnormal thermal radiation. Looking at the search parameters they set, I couldn't help but smirk with contempt. This is the tragedy of those who believe technology is everything. They treat plants like machines, and agriculture like an assembly line. They will never understand that when it comes to life. The most powerful force is often nurtured deep within the most unassuming soil. My microecological matrix doesn't use towering glass greenhouses. There is no roaring heavy machinery. All miracles, all computing power, and all energy interactions occur in the dark world, 30 stenomies beneath the surface. Tens of billions of the century fungi, the nitrogen-fixing army, and the phosphate-solubilizing army use inert heavy metal crystals as skeletons to build an incredibly massive and efficient underground microscopic network that operates silently, perfectly blending into the natural geomagnetism and microclimate. On satellite spectral images, this 30-acre abandoned orchard still looks heavily polluted by heavy metals and overrun with weeds, which are actually decoy plants, intentionally kept for camouflage and to maintain microecological diversity.
It is a completely dead zone with absolutely zero developmental value.
In the first round of data filtering,
Lu Yu's search algorithm automatically and completely filtered out these isolated coordinates.
The ultimate camouflage is to remain formless and invisible.
It's Friday afternoon.
The sky is gloomy,
Brewing a heavy downpour.
I am staring intently at my screen, my left hand rapidly typing commands on the keyboard, time-tuning the EC values of several nodes at the edge of the matrix to deal with the changes in soil osmotic pressure that the impending heavy rain might bring.
Just then, a low, incredibly arrogant roar of an engine rumbles from afar, shattering the dead silence of the suburbs.
I freeze, stopping what I'm doing. I look up past the rusted, probabling orchard gate, peering through a crack in the old brick wall. Through the gap, I can clearly see a luxury convoy of 5 black Mercedes G-Class SUVs and 2 Maybachs tearing down the muddy road outside. Their heavy tires smash through the waterlogged potholes, spattering thick, filthy mud everywhere, slinging hard against the orchard's rusted iron gate.
It's Zhang Hai's convoy. A message from Chef Yin Lin confirmed it.
Zhang Hai is losing his mind with anxiety, since satellite maps yielded nothing. He, Liu Yu, and their massive procurement team started searching manually like headless chickens, scouting every suspicious farm in the city's suburbs. They just returned empty-handed from a large strawberry farm 5 kilometers away, and now they are heading to their next target, utterly frustrated. The window of one of the Maybachs is rolled halfway down. Through the gap, I can actually see Zhang Hai sitting in the back. His brow is knitted tight, his face pale with rage,
Rowing furiously into his phone.
Next to him, Liu Yu is staring at his tablet in irritation, covering his nose with a handkerchief from time to time,
As if utterly disgusted by the desolate, ruined scenery outside.
This is already the 3rd time they've driven past this abandoned orchard. Every single time, their convoy roars past with absolute, insufferable arrogance. In their minds, this toxic, heavy metal polluted wasteland, where even weeds refuse to grow, this graveyard they dumped on me like garbage, doesn't deserve even a single second of their attention. They have no idea, and could never even dream, that the mastermind who turned the city's elite financial circles completely upside down, the absolute god who has backed them into a hopeless corner, is currently sitting behind a broken wall, less than 20 meters away from them.
Here I am, sitting in this cramped, sweltering monitoring room that doesn't even have air conditioning, smelling of damp earth,
Holding a cup of cheap tea that went cold hours ago, watching these high and mighty billionaires scurry past like stray dogs, completely calm. The dust kicked up by their convoy hangs heavy in the air, only to be quickly washed away by the first drops of falling rain. I pull back my gaze and look back at the glowing screen.
On the dark green microecological 3-day topology map, billions of active fungal colonies are reacting to my lines of code,
Fringing and exchanging energy with exquisite precision as the rainwater seeps down. Every flashing data point represents a law of life, one far beyond modern human understanding, being completely rewritten. In the outside world, capitalistic giants are running blind, screaming in panic. But beneath this toxic soil, just a wall away,
flawless micro-universes quietly operating right at my fingertips.
keep searching, Zhang Hai. Burn through every last sense you have, every connection, will, and all your arrogance. Go ahead and search. When you finally hit a dead end, face to face with the very mud you despised, only then will you realize what true despair actually feels like. In the microscopic world of physics and biology,
I can shield myself from any detection by building an airtight microecological matrix. But in the macroscopic world of business,
as long as physical goods are moving, traces are bound to be left behind. The head chef at Yunlin restaurant kept his lips tightly sealed, but the loaders and cold chain drivers working under him couldn't maintain that level of absolute isolation. After blindly thrashing around in madness for one whole week, Zhang Hai's massive capital machine finally stooped to the clumsiest yet most effective method of all: following the clues. They bribed their way into the traffic surveillance systems along the route, painstakingly analyzing, frame by frame, that beaten-up box truck that delivered goods to Yunlin every single morning. Ultimately, they locked the origin of the logistics route to the eastern suburbs of the city. On Saturday morning, before the thin mist had even cleared, I sat in front of the monitors in the control room, watching the feed sent back by the drone's perimeter warning system. A massive convoy of over a dozen black business vans and SUVs, like a furious black serpent, slithering along the pocked-old dirt road, and finally slamming to a screeching halt right outside the rusty iron gates of the abandoned orchard. Zhang Hai, accompanied by his entire core procurement team, as well as his inseparable overseas-educated PhD, Liu Yu, jumped out of the vehicles in a towering rage. Through the audio feed of the high-definition cameras, I could clearly hear Zhang Hai's frustrated, bewildered growls. Holding up his phone's GPS, he spun in circles twice, screaming at his head of intelligence behind him, demanding to know if they had lost their minds to have traced the city's absolute top-tier legendary supplier to this notoriously toxic, heavy metal poisoned wasteland. Nearby, Liu Yu stomped his feet in irritation, trying to avoid the muddy puddles as he pointed at the grayish-white sailing soil and the dead tree trunks around them. In an extremely confident, academic tone, he assured Zhang Hai that this place was a complete dead zone, where not even moth could survive. let alone grow top-grade vegetables that completely shatter conventional thresholds. The delivery truck must have just used this place as a transfer station, he insisted, ignoring their frantic, headless chickens squabbling outside the gate. I calmly picked up the tactical tablet beside me and had deactivated the visual camouflage netting around the perimeter of the orchard. They were a row of mutated tall plants I had specifically grown inside the iron gates to absorb the heavy metal toxins.
As I tapped the micro-ecological intervention command on the screen,
The Shermilic fungi deep in the soil instantly cut off the nutrient supply to this row of blood hemp while releasing a highly concentrated dose of ethylene ripening agent. Within a matter of seconds, those towering plants that served as our shield withered and collapsed like a fading mirage, exposing the true, breathtaking view of the orchard's interior completely to Zhonghai and his men. In an instant, the shouting outside the gate came to a dead stop. A dead silence. A suffocating, brain-numbing silence washed over everyone standing outside the iron gate. The phone slipped from Zhonghai's hand, crashing heavily into the muddy water. His face, just a moment ago flushed with rage, was now completely drained of color. His jaw trembled slightly. His eyes bulged out, as if he had just laid eyes on some eldritch monster that defied all human understanding. What lay before them wasn't some barren, toxic wasteland at all. It was a divine kingdom on Earth, completely defying every law of nature. Across the 30 mu of land, there wasn't a single greenhouse canopy in sight. Yet every single inch of space was bursting with a terrifying, almost overwhelming vitality. The Provence tomato vines were as thick as giant green pythons, laden with massive fruits that gleamed like rich rubies. Nearby, the leaves of the modified cucumbers looked like giant emerald hand fans, their surfaces shimmering with a healthy, glassy sheen. But what was truly terrifying was the soil. Once gray, hardened, toxic dirt had turned into a rich, deep, dark brown. Its surface was even coated in a visible, pulsing, eerie green shimmer, rising and falling like a gentle breath. It was the reflection of a highly concentrated symbiotic mycelium under the morning light. It formed a razor-sharp boundary line between the orchard and the outside world. Outside the line was barrenness, rot, and death. Inside the line was prosperity, a lush, overwhelming explosion of pure life force. Just as Zhonghai and his crew stood there, their souls practically blasted out of their bodies by this staggering sight, an even more mind-shattering scene unfolded, because the outer camouflage plants had collapsed. The swarm of starving, migratory whiteflies and locusts in the surrounding wasteland caught the rich scent of the lush vegetation. Like conquerors discovering a new continent, they swarmed toward the heart of the orchard in a dark, suffocating cloud. "Watch out for the pests," Lu Yu cried out in pure instinct. According to his theories on industrialized farming, once an open-area field is hit by a swarm like this, it gets stripped down to bare stalks in a matter of minutes. But then, a bone-chilling sight occurred. The moment that overwhelming cloud of pests crossed the orchard's boundary line, it was as if they slammed into an invisible, deadly wall of size. There was no mist of pesticide spray. There was no physical electric fencing. Yet the lead locusts suddenly began to twitch violently, mid-air. Their compound eyes instantly gorged with blood and burst. Their antennae twisted frantically before they plummeted like broken kites, crashing straight onto the boundary line, sensing some terrifying pheromone suppression. The rest of the swarm came to a bizarre, screeching halt mid-air. They desperately turned around, fleeing outward at 10 times the speed they had arrived, as if this vibrant, thriving orchard were a hellish abyss waiting to swallow them whole. It was a biological force field, practically visible to the naked eye. That is the result of specialized Achomonocytes and phosphate-solubilizing bacteria within my microecological matrix, regulated by highly precise electrical conductivity, constantly releasing high-concentration, targeted repellent pheromones and volatile organic compounds, VOCs, into the air. To humans, these substances are nothing more than a refreshing, crisp scent of plants. But to the nervous system of low-level insects, it was an instant, paralyzing nerve gas. Thud, a heavy thud of someone falling to their knees, came from outside the iron gate. It was Lu Yu, this self-proclaimed returned PhD, who thought he mastered the most advanced agricultural tech, was now completely broken. His leg went completely weak and he collapsed heavily, kneeling in the mud. He didn't even notice when his gold-rimmed glasses slipped off and shattered on the ground. He practically crawled on all fours to the orchard's boundary line, completely ignoring his expensive suit getting soaked in the muddy water. Frantically, he swept away the dead insects on the ground with his bare hands and scooped up a handful of the dark soil from inside the orchard. He buried his face in the dirt, sniffing it greedily, before letting out a desperate sob-like roar. A spatial exclusion field. A fungal synergistic defense network. This is impossible. This only exists in theoretical thinking. Without billions of genetic iterations and dynamic simulations by supercomputers, it's impossible to build such a perfect ecological force field in a natural environment. This makes no sense. This is absolutely, scientifically impossible. All the academic pride and absolute faith in technology he had built up over his entire life
were ground into pathetic dust right before this handful of lightly scented soil.
I pushed open the worn-out wooden door of the surveillance room, holding a tactical tablet in my hand, and stepped onto the dark brown mud, walking toward the iron gate at a calm, steady pace. Yokai shuddered violently, as if struck by lightning. When he realized that the godlike figure walking out of this divine realm and controlling everything was actually Lin Cong, the very man he had kicked out and humiliated in every possible way just a week ago.
The expression on his face, in just a few short seconds, went from sheer shock
To utter confusion, to extreme terror, before finally twisting into a near-insane ecstasy. This was a classic gambler's mentality. In the face of overwhelming despair, he instinctively grasped at the final straw. He thought that since I was his former subordinate, and since I was still in the city, then there was still room to negotiate.
Lin Cong, it's you?
It's actually you! Zheng Hai threw himself violently against the rusted iron gate, clutching the iron bars with a death grip. He squeezed so hard
that his knuckles turned white. His voice cracked with intense excitement.
I should have known! Who else but you could grow something like this? Cong, my brother! We're brothers, aren't we? You really kept me in the dark. He seemed to have completely forgotten how in that meeting room, he had used a mere 100,000 yuan and this toxic land to drive me into a corner. 44. Turning to his equally dumbfounded entourage, he roared like a madman. What are you all standing there for? Open this gate right now. Hand over the contract. But I just stood there, barely half a meter inside the iron gate. I didn't open the gate, and I didn't say a word. I just kept my head down, staring at the real-time soil pH levels on my tablet because of last night's light drizzle.
The pH levels in that sector had fluctuated by 0.002.
I was busy typing in commands to instruct the underlying soil microbes to run a localized buffer. Seeing that I was completely ignoring him, Zheng Hai panicked even more. He frantically pulled a thick stack of documents from the briefcase his assistant handed him and shoved them through the gap in the iron gate like they were some priceless treasure. Lin Cong, what happened in the past was all my fault. I was blind. I let that useless trash Lu Yu blind me. Zhang Hai slapped the contract desperately, spit flying everywhere as he yelled, "It's an acquisition contract. 30 million? No, 50 million. As long as you license this farm's technology to Hai Kong, I'll immediately give you 20%. No, 30% of the shares, completely free. And you can step right in as our group's chief scientist. With the two of us working together, this technology is enough to monopolize the global market for premium ingredients. We'll be ringing the bell at NASDAQ in no time. Tens of millions in cold, hard cash, plus immeasurable future equity payouts. For any ordinary person, this was a staggering fortune, enough to make them pass out on the spot. Zhang Hai stared at me intently, his eyes filled with that ruthless confidence unique to capitalists. He truly believed that there was nothing in this world money couldn't buy. If there was, it just meant he hadn't offered enough. At last, I finished fine-tuning the data. I raised my head, letting my gaze pass over that multi-million-dollar contract soaked in rainwater, and landing on Zhang Hai's face, which was twisted with greed and desperation. The expression was utterly calm, like I was looking at a paramecium making a futile struggle under a microscope. I didn't even spare a glance at the contract. Instead, I turned and walked toward a genetically mutated jade cucumber plant nearby. I pulled an extremely precise goat-hair pollinating brush from my pocket
And with absolute care and focus, swept the specific pollen from a male flower onto the stigma of a female flower.
keeping my back turned to Zhang Hai. I spoke, my voice completely devoid of emotion, yet it cut clearly through the gentle breeze. You still have no idea what you're actually up against, do you? I stopped what I was doing, turned to look at him coldly, and said, your capital, your distribution channels, the industrial packaging you're so damn proud of, it's all completely worthless in the face of the fundamental laws of life. I reached out, pointing directly at the breathing black soil beneath our feet. Your money can't buy the breathing rhythm of a single fungus in this soil. Now take your waste paper and get the hell away from the edge of my ecosystem. Outside the iron gate, the rain grew denser, freezing Zhang Hai's hand in midair. In his grip, the mud-stained acquisition contract, worth $50 million plus non-voting shares in the Hai Kong Group, rustled desperately in the wind and rain. He stared at me with deathly intensity, the wild ecstasy on his face draining away bit by bit, replaced by a twisted expression of utter, incomprehensible shock. In his worldview, and the business logic he had built his entire life upon, any act of being noble was simply because the price wasn't high enough. He couldn't believe anyone could look at wealth that could buy half the block and not even blink.
Lin Cong, don't you get too cocky.
Zheng Hai is too greedy.
His voice dripping with the hysteria of a desperate man backed into a corner. You think you can live off some top-secret formula for the rest of your life? As long as it's grown on this earth.
There is absolutely nothing that capital can't reverse engineer. We have the top agricultural research institutes in the province, in the entire country. As long as I'm willing to throw enough money at it, I can have your soil tested,
Your water analyzed.
give me 1 month at most, and your entire foundation will become an open secret to the whole industry. Watching him fume and rage was like watching a caveman trying to crack quantum encryption with an abacus. I didn't bother to argue. Instead, I stepped back inside the iron gate and turned around the heavily customized tactical tablet in my hand, shoving the screen right in front of Zheng Hai and the limp, trembling Liu on the ground. I said, "Take a good look, Zheng Hai. What did you think this was? What did you think this was? A fertilizer ratio chart? Or some encryption key for a genetically modified seed?" My voice was freezing cold, devoid of any warmth. There were no chemical formulas on the screen like they had imagined. Instead, it displayed a massive, dizzying, three-dimensional dynamic topology map. Countless vivid green points of light, representing microecological nodes, flickered and drifted across the screen. Well, dense, interlocking streams of red and blue data refreshed in real time, at lightning-fast speeds, resembling a swirling galaxy. Slumped on the ground, Dr. Lu Yu stared through his cracked, gold-rimmed glasses, his breath instantly catching in his throat the moment he saw the schematic. "This isn't some static formula," I said, pointing to the data flashing wildly across the screen. "This is a microscopic universe made of tens of billions of ancient fungi, mutagen-fixing bacteria, and phosphates solubilizing bacteria. Every single inch of soil here is built on a dynamic symbiotic chain that is incredibly fragile, yet immensely powerful. To suppress the heavy metal ions in this toxic soil, we must recalculate the EC values based on minute-by-minute microclimate changes, ground pressure, and even magnetic field fluctuations. We have to calculate the electrical conductivity and pH levels, and carry out millimeter-level targeted interventions." Looking at Zheng Hai's face, completely clueless but instinctively terrified, I handed down my final verdict. This isn't farming. I am controlling the laws of life and death in a microscopic empire. Do you really think your money can buy the processing power in my brain? With that, I pulled back my tablet, not even bothering to give them another glance. I turned around and walked back to that run-down monitoring room. Outside, Zheng Hai's furious curses drifted in, followed by the heavy slam of a car door. The fleet of cars drove off like beaten dogs. But I knew that with a gambler's greed like Zheng Hai's, he would never let this go. Since he couldn't buy it, he would definitely try to steal it. It was entirely expected. Late that night, the infrared warning system along the orchard's border let out a faint buzz. Sitting in front of the screens in the monitoring room, I watched the feed from the night vision cameras. Several matte black, dust-proof off-road vehicles were parked in a hidden spot 1 kilometer away from the orchard. Under the cover of darkness, Liu Yu and 7 or 8 heavily armed men in thick hazmat suits were working along the outermost border of the orchard. They didn't dare cross that invisible minefield of a border. Terrified of triggering that terrifying biofield, Liu Yu directed his men to use a custom hydraulic robotic arm, carefully digging up 3 rapidly growing Provence tomato seedlings, roots, soil, and all, from just inside the boundary.
Along with about 50 kilograms of the pitch black core matrix soil.
The soil was quickly packed into military-grade biosampling boxes, equipped with independent temperature controls and oxygen circulation systems. Liu Yu stared at the sealed boxes, his eyes behind the protective mask, gleaming with fanaticism and greed. It was as if a tomb raider had finally laid hands on the pharaoh's scepter. Throughout the entire process, I just watched coldly, holding my coffee. I had even turned off the underground microcurrent deterrent grid in that area beforehand, let them to take the soil and seedlings without a hitch. But in the laws of microecology, stealing the physical carrier of the matrix is no different from detonating a biological nuke. The next morning, I didn't leave the orchard. Instead, through a covert intelligence network set up by the head chef of Yinglen restaurant, and my absolute deduction of the microscopic data, I could clearly see what was happening inside the province's top level 3 biosafety lab. To crack my technology, Zheng Hai had bet almost all of Heikong Fresh's remaining liquid capital to book out that top-tier laboratory. He even gathered more than a dozen leading experts in biology and agriculture. The moment that sealed biological sampling box was opened on the dust-free workstation, the dark brown soil was still emitting a mesmerizing, lively fragrance. The professors looked at it like they had just found the ultimate treasure. They immediately portioned it into hundreds of petri dishes and rushed them into high-precision mass spectrometers, gas chromatographs, and gene sequencers. Through the bulletproof glass, Zheng Hai watched the busy researchers, nervously rubbing his hands together. He was absolutely convinced that once he got his hands on the precious ingredients and nutrient ratios of this soil, his industrial farm could instantly replicate this miracle. But what he didn't realize was that the moment those 50 kilograms of soil left my orchard and was cut off from the real-time microcurrent guidance and precise buffer droplet infusions of my underground supercomputer array, the countdown had already begun. At a microscopic level, disaster was unfolding at a terrifying speed. The monitoring equipment in the lab was the first to shriek with alarms. Cut off from my dynamic data regulations, the delicate EC value balance within the soil was instantly shattered. Without the buffer solution, The internal pH levels plummeted rapidly within just 10 minutes.
The entire environment rapidly acidified. The inert heavy metal crystals, which had been tightly locked away by the superfungus, XR7, through intracellular chelation,
began to break down on a massive scale under the corrosive acid. Massive amounts of highly toxic, free-floating ions like lead and copper, like demons breaking their chains, flooded into the microscopic environment.
Faced with this lethal backflash of toxins,
The symbiotic colonies, which were originally docile and focused on synthesizing aromatic compounds and secondary metabolites, instantly cut off their symbiotic mode to protect themselves.
They were forced into a brutal, hyper-aggressive survival mode. The footage under the microscope made all the top experts present scream in horror. That wasn't a plant cultivation anymore. It was a hellish, mutual slaughter.
to secure enough energy to resist the extreme toxicity of the heavy metals,
The fungomycelia, acting like aliens, first impaled the root systems of those 3 tomato seedlings. Within seconds, the once thick roots were completely drained of all nutrients.
The plant cell walls shattered piece by piece.
Next,
Fighting over the limited living space, the fungal network began cannibalizing itself.
they secreted highly corrosive lysozymes, dissolving each other's cell membranes. In the macro view of the petri dishes,
Shanghai and New Yu watched helplessly as the once vibrant, fragrant, dark brown soil began to boil and bubble violently in less than 24 hours.
then, with a soft hissing sound, all signs of life were instantly extinguished. The soil in the petri dishes collapsed completely, turning into a puddle of thick, foul-smelling black water that reeked of pungent hydrogen sulfide and highly corrosive heavy metals. And it didn't stop there. The highly toxic black water even corroded right through several glass dishes with weaker acid resistance. Dripped onto the dust-free workstation, burning deep, shocking holes into the surface. Alarms blared throughout the entire laboratory, and the ventilation system began running at full blast. The experts scrabbled out of the operations room like they were fleeing the plague.
what is going on here?
Where's my money? Where's my formula? Zhang Hai clawed at the bulletproof glass. His eyes were bloodshot as he roared at the fleeing experts. The lab director was the very same old professor who had run the blind taste test on my tomatoes back at the inspection center. Right now, his face was deathly pale. Pulling off his gas mask, he looked at Zhang Hai with eyes full of sheer terror and a sliver of pity. The formula? There is no formula. That thing is a living, sentient weapon of mass destruction. The old professor's voice trembled violently. He stepped up to Zhang Hai and ruthlessly pronounced a death sentence on his greedy empire. Mr. Zhang, don't you get it yet? You stole a greenhouse full of soil, like ripping the motherboard out of a cutting-edge supercomputer. Sure, that motherboard has the most advanced hardware, but without that mysterious man's core algorithm, without his real-time, dynamic data feed, this board won't run a single program. Instead, it will short-circuit and self-destruct.
The professor glanced back at the puddle of bubbling, toxic black sludge inside the operations room.
He swallowed hard, still shaken to his core. This isn't just a pile of scrap metal. No, it's worse than worthless. This is a mass of highly toxic, hazardous waste that will consume everything the moment it is unleashed from its containment. Zhang Hai, just what kind of monster have you provoked? Zhang Hai collapsed completely, sliding down to the floor. Slumped against the cold wall, he gasped desperately for air.
The immense corporate power he had been so proud of,
And his belief that money could buy absolutely anything, were utterly shattered by the brutal laws of life. Laws that demanded absolute perfection, where even a 0.001% margin of error meant instant death. He finally understood. Lin Cong hadn't just monopolized the market. He had monopolized the highest dimensional laws of life on this very planet. Within this domain, if you do not obey the Creator's will, your only end is total annihilation. The ruthless greed of corporate power had become nothing more than a pathetic, tragic joke. Big money has an incredibly sharp sense of smell, and the speed at which it cuts ties and abandons its own is faster than the most cold-blooded predator in nature. There was no way to cover up the microscopic nuclear explosion that had just occurred in that top-tier provincial P3 lab. Word was bound to get out. And those high-priced professors and experts Zhang Hai had hired, after witnessing that mind-bending, freakish biochemical reaction with his own eyes, driven by sheer terror of the unknown, and a desperate need to protect his academic reputation, he didn't hesitate for a second to spill the entire truth to his financial backers. Within a mere 24 hours, the news that Yinlan Restaurant's legendary, god-tier vegetables actually came from Lin Cong. This explosive, dramatic revelation was like a depth charge going off, completely shattering the peace of East China's elite investment circles. I sat in the monitoring room of my abandoned orchard, holding a cup of warm water, watching encrypted emails and leaked boardroom forum screenshots cascade down my screen like a waterfall. Yunlin, head chef, had now become my ultimate free informant. He eagerly reported how those usually untouchable, high and mighty billionaires were now frantically begging for my contact details. To these razor-sharp investors, the pieces of the puzzle had fallen perfectly into place. That absolute idiot, Zhang He, all for the sake of his so-called hydroponic industrialization and hyped-up corporate lies, had actually kicked out a literal genius. Someone who held the ultimate code of life, a creator capable of single-handedly rewriting the rules of global luxury agriculture.
He had even tried to humiliate him by throwing him a toxic plot of land.
This wasn't just a catastrophic business mistake.
This was the most unforgivable mortal sin in the financial world. He had incinerated hundreds of times of potential profit.
The backlash came like an absolute landslide. The lead investor for Lin Fresh's Series B funding moved instantly the moment they confirmed that the soil producing that toxic black water in the lab was actually the microecological matrix carrier I had built.
They didn't just pull all their future funding on the spot.
They teamed up with other major institutions to ruthlessly short Lin Cong's valuation on the private equity market.
The very business partners who were raising toast at Zhang Hai's victory banquet just yesterday
became a pack of wolves showing their fangs. Today, they knew exactly what they had to do if they wanted to kiss up to me, the true mastermind behind it all, and beg for even a fraction of a chance to collaborate. Their ultimate offering of loyalty was to stomp Zhang Hai completely into the dirt. But me? I didn't care about their shallow high society games.
My eyes were locked onto the microecological topology map on my main screen.
After nearly a month of operating at peak capacity, the Matrix had completely purged and revitalized this 30-acre wasteland.
Beneath the surface,
hundreds of billions of microbes had formed a massive, perfect ecosystem. The brutal high-stress conditions in the core zone yielded those legendary, god-tier ingredients reserved exclusively for Yinlin. But along the outer edges of the matrix, as the toxins in the soil gradually broke down, the EC and pH levels began to balance out. What bloomed there was a new crop, with an incredibly short growth cycle, and an absolutely staggering, massive yield. Sure, these secondary crops lacked the mind-blowing, hyper-concentrated nutrients of the core zone that could practically touch your soul, but in terms of texture and sheer flavor, they still utterly annihilated every single industrial vegetable on the market.
these crops had an incredibly high cell wall density.
Of perfect sugar to acid ratio. And that pure, refreshing plant aroma you only get from a natural, symbiotic environment. But best of all, their yield was absolutely massive. Once the microecological network was established, the energy conversion efficiency was dozens of times higher than traditional agriculture. I knew it was finally time to toll the death knell for Zhang Hai's business empire. A total crushing blow like this couldn't just stop at some high-end luxury concept. To completely rip apart a fake organic myth, you have to go straight for his retail base and tear out his roots with good old-fashioned, brutal price dumping. I didn't bother building some complex sales network, and I didn't spend a single cent on advertising. All I did was make a few late-night calls to local, honest supermarket owners, the ones driven to the brink of bankruptcy by Lin Fresh's ruthless monopoly. I opened up my supply matrix to them at rock-bottom prices, 20% below the market average. My only condition was that they had to hang copies of national lab reports proving zero pesticide residues and elite nutritional values right in their most visible window. Over the next 24 hours, the city's everyday grocery market witnessed a total, ruthless bloodbath. At 7 a.m., the first batch of freshly harvested vegetables, straight from the fields, hit the shelves of those local supermarkets. At first, the elderly bargain hunters only bought them just to give it a try because of the low prices. But the moment the first tomato was sliced open in their kitchens and the first batch of greens hit the hot wok, that long-lost, rich, natural aroma drifted all the way down the hallways. Word of mouth spread like wildfire through the streets. Everyday folks might not have the refined taste buds to appreciate a $1,000 Michelin dish, but they damn sure know when a vegetable actually tastes like a real vegetable. The contrast was night and day. On one side, you had Lin Cong's glossy, high-end stores, which were getting blasted by whistleblowers online for borderline pesticide levels, yielding bitter, tasteless, and soulless industrial hydroponics. On the other side, you had these cheaper, nameless vegetables that tasted exactly like the sweet, pure produce of our childhood memories. Customers voting with their feet is a brutal thing. In less than half a day, dozens of Lin Cong's high-end boutique stores across the city were completely deserted. Their once bustling checkout lines fell dead silent as swarms of shoppers packed into those small local grocery stores, desperately scrambling to buy up my fresh produce. Some even got into shouting matches over a few cucumbers. Meanwhile, online, as the backlash over Lin Cong's toxic pesticide levels continued to blow up, and thousands of buyers flooded social media with glowing organic plugs for my god-tier, budget-friendly alternative. Lin Fresh's brand reputation was completely shattered, dragged through the mud, and nailed to a pillar of shame. The law of when a wall starts to crumble, everyone gives it a push is just as true in the business world, only it's 100 times more brutal. By 3 p.m., Lin Cong's cash flow crisis finally blew up from the inside. To fund his reckless expansion, Zhang Hai had been running a heavy asset model, constantly stiffing his suppliers. But today, with cash flow at his retail stores completely drying up, combined with rumors of investors pulling out spreading like wildfire through the industry, the low-end farmers in Heikong's supply chain, the packaging plants, and the logistics fleets instantly fell into a panic. They swarmed into the Heikong headquarters in massive crowds, wasting angry banners and smashing the glass lobby doors to pieces. They frantically demanded months of unpaid bills. At the warehouse centers, the loaders and unloaders went straight on strike. The delivery fleets refused to move. By evening, over 80% of Heikong stores across the city had their fresh produce shelves wiped completely bare. Only a few withered, rotting leaves were left shivering in the cold drafts. In just one day, this massive, industrialized fresh food empire was utterly crushed by the raw quality and data of basic produce. Its entire foundation blown wide open and reduced to a pile of shattered glass. I watched the security monitors showing my orchard, peaceful as ever, listening to the soft pitter-patter of the rain outside, and don't feel a single thing. From the moment they tried to fight nature's delicate ecosystem with chemical fertilizers and pesticides, this end was already set in stone. I merely speeded up the decomposition of a decaying corpse, and right at the heart of this collapse, the ugliest side of human nature is playing out right beside Shanghai. According to my intel network, that arrogant, foreign-educated PhD, Liu Yu. After the tragedy at the P3 lab, Liu Yu's academic beliefs completely crumbled. He knew damn well that he had not only crossed someone who possessed god-level technology, but his failed heist of the Matrix. Soil had dragged Heikong's reputation and finances further into the abyss, facing a tidal wave of upcoming business fraud lawsuit. This coward who only knows how to make PowerPoint slides chose the most shameless way out. He used his access as chief technology officer to forge an overseas purchase contract and embezzle the last 3 million yuan of emergency funds, meant to keep the company afloat. Then, he slipped away onto an overnight flight out of the country. He didn't even have the guts to say goodbye to Zhang Hade in person. He just left a ridiculously pathetic note on his desk. The police report later revealed what it said. Mr. Zhang, this is not agriculture at all. This is a strike from a whole different dimension. Going up against someone who holds the ultimate key to life itself is a death sentence. I'm going back to Cornell to retake basic biology. Good luck. You are on your own. Liu Yu's betrayal was only the first stab. The one who truly dragged Zhonghai into the bottomless abyss was his calculating wife, Li Xiao. As the chief financial officer of the company, Li Xiao knew better than anyone just how terrifying Heikong's current balance sheet really was. The moment she found out that the investors were collectively shorting the stock and that angry suppliers were blockading the doors, her ruthless nature as a servant of capital immediately took over. Weathering the storm with Zhonghai was never an option for her. That afternoon, while Zhonghai was frantically dealing with the angry mob of creditors at the front desk, Lisi used her position to quickly liquidate the last few unmortgaged properties under Zhonghai's name at rock-bottom prices. She didn't just transfer every single hidden asset she could get her hands on. She didn't even spare the Maybach Zhonghai, always used to show off. She drove it straight to the used car market and traded it for cold, hard cash. By the time an exhausted, of course, Zhonghai finally managed to pacify a small group of suppliers late that night and dragged his heavy footsteps back to his luxury duplex apartment. The only thing waiting for him was a scene of utter devastation and the court's asset seizure seal fresh on the front door. The place was empty, betrayed and abandoned by everyone. I picked up my cold tea and drank it in one gulp. On the screen, the stock ticker for Heikong Fresh had already turned gray, marked for suspension and investigation. Piled next to my computer were hundreds of letters of intent from the top fresh food chains, venture capitalists, and even national research institutes across the country. Like sharks smelling blood, they had stepped right over Zhonghai's corpse, frantically extending olive branches to my humble, abandoned orchard. But I didn't reply to a single one. The Matrix was never built to cater to these mundane capitalists. Strip away that fake commercial veneer, Zhonghai is nothing but a parasite who doesn't understand the microscopic secrets hidden in a single handful of soil. Now, it's time to clean up the last of the garbage. I knew that man, who now had absolutely nothing left, had nowhere else to go but here. A light morning mist slowly drifted over the 30-acre abandoned orchard, but the moment it hit the invisible bioforce field, it was sliced into delicate threads by the exquisitely complex secondary volatile organic compounds. VCAS. After an entire month of extreme evolution, the underground microecological matrix had reached a state of perfect biophysical closure. I no longer needed to perform frequent manual micromanipulations. Hundreds of billions of specialized fungi, nitrogen-fixing bacteria, and phosphate-solubilizing bacteria had completely fused with the land's magnetic fields and water veins, forming a massive, self-regulating superorganism. The heavy ions that were once lethal to humans were not only locked deep underground, inside inert crystal lattices, but had even been transformed by the fungi into weak bioelectric conductors, which in turn stimulated the plant roots to absorb nutrients. On the surface, The vines were heavy with clusters of bright red fruit. Seam-like tomatoes and emerald-like cucumbers radiated a rich, vibrant energy that made the soul tremble in awe. This once poisoned wasteland had truly transformed into a kingdom of heaven on earth. I sat on the wooden chair in the control room, my finger gently swiping across the tablet screen. On it was the final microdata summary. The sheer perfection of every metric had practically hit the theoretical ceiling of what any carbon-based life form on Earth could ever achieve. Right then, the rusty iron gate outside the orchard let out a harsh, screeching grind. I didn't even look up. My infrared sensor network had already mapped the weak, erratic heat signature outside and flashed it onto my screen. A figure stumbled in, looking like a walking corpse, with its soul completely ripped out. He collapsed heavily onto the rich, dark soil at the edge of the orchard. With Jar Hai, barely 48 hours had passed, but the fresh produce tycoon, who used to strut under the spotlight in custom Armani, boasting about his massive financial empire, was now completely ruined. His suit was torn to shreds, covered in vomit and mud. His hair clung to his scalp like matted weeds, and he reeked of cheap alcohol. Pure despair, and the rancid stench of someone who hadn't washed in days. He had lost everything. His wife ran off. His TTO fled with the company funds. In short, sellers had turned Lin Cong stock into worthless paper, while angry suppliers, owed months of hard-earned money, had practically torn his headquarters apart. He had even looted every last personal possession he had left to save face. He struggled to push himself up from the mud, his knees dragging through the dark earth, as he crawled toward the door of my control room.
Lin Cong,
Save me! Zhao Hai's voice was raspy, sounding like sandpaper scraping against rusty metal.
With a heavy thud, he dropped straight to his knees, less than 2 meters away from me.
His once proud head was now buried deep in the dirt. He didn't even dare look up at the high-grade crops around him, the very plants he had once dismissed as worthless, low-tech garbage. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I never should have listened to that fraud, Li Yu. I shouldn't have diluted your shares.
Zhang Hai banged his head against the ground, begging incoherently. Kong isn't completely dead yet.
The Li Wan brand is still alive.
Lin Cong, I'll give you all of Luan's shell companies.
And all of our distribution channels. I'll transfer everything to your name. I'll work for you. I'll be your dog. Please, just supply me with the crops from this land. Just help me cover that debt of hundreds of millions. I beg you. Please spare my life. Snot and tears streamed down his face. He desperately shoved the crumpled, stamped share transfer papers toward me. I finally stopped writing and put down my pen. I stand up, looking down at this pathetic capitalist begging for mercy before the sheer miracle of nature in my microscopic world. His despair, his regret, even the tears streaming down his face right now, are nothing more than primitive neurotransmitters secreted by a dying carbon-based organism, utterly worthless and entirely meaningless. I don't even have the urge to step on him. Seeking revenge on a defective product already crushed by the dual laws of physics and biology is a massive waste of my brain's computing power.
Zhang Hai, I say, looking at the near-perfect microbial growth curve on my tablet.
My voice is flat, without a single ripple of emotion.
As if reciting a fundamental axiom of physics. Under the absolute causality of the microecosystem, nothing can be obtained through cheap tricks or superficial packaging. Every single breath of a plant, every division of fungi, must obey the strictest laws of conservation of energy. Shifting my gaze from the screen to his twisted, distorted face, I add, the moment you place capital above the laws of nature, you are already eliminated. These words become the final straw that completely shatters Zhang Hai's mental defenses. He collapses to the ground, limp and broken, staring blankly at the sparrows in the sky, which are circling from a distance, terrified of the orchard's biofield.
A hollow, tragic laugh escapes his throat, like that of a dying beast.
A few minutes later, the sharp blare of sirens echoes from the dirt road outside the orchard. Several court enforcement vehicles and police cars, with red and blue lights flashing, screech to a halt outside. Fully armed execution officers and beliefs quickly march into the orchard. For a brief moment, they freeze, momentarily stunned by the overwhelming, vibrant energy and pure fragrance filling the orchard. Snapping back to reality, they stride over to Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai, you are under arrest for massive corporate embezzlement, maliciously defaulting on massive debts, and multiple counts of commercial fraud. By law, we are taking you into custody and freezing every single one of your associated accounts. With a sharp click, the cold handcuffs lock, crushing Zhang Hai's last shred of resistance. The bailiffs drag him away like a sack of industrial waste that has been completely stripped of all value. They haul the limp, lifeless body of Zhang Hai out of the orchard and shove him into the back of a police car. As the sirens fade into the distance, the low-level capitalist verse of Zhang Hai and Lin Cong Fresh is officially brought to a close. But the peace of this orchard doesn't last long. Just as the taillights of the police cars vanish in the distance, a completely different convoy, An incredibly high-spec, majestic, and intimidating motorcade rolls in like a silent torrent of black steel. They glide silently down this remote dirt road.
6 black Hongqiu H9 sedans, bearing provincial department special plates and exclusive passes from the National Academy of Agricultural Sciences.
There are no blaring horns, no flashy displays.
Only the heavy, absolute gravity of the state apparatus.
The convoy comes to a perfect imposing halt right outside the orchard gates. Special agents in black suits quickly got out of the cars and immediately set up a maximum security perimeter. The door of the second honky sedan was respectfully opened. The explains
A silver-haired elder,
wearing a faded, washed-out Zhongshan suit, yet with eyes as sharp as a falcon, slowly stepped out of the car, flanked by provincial leaders and top-tier experts. I recognized him instantly. He was Elder Qi, the lifetime honorary president of China Agricultural University, an academician of the National Academy of Engineering,
and the brilliant mastermind behind our nation's food security and soil protection strategy.
Elder Qi waved off his assistants when they tried to support him. The moment his feet touched the edge of the orchard, he froze. This legendary figure, who had witnessed our country's agriculture rise from extreme poverty to prosperity, and who had dedicated nearly 70 years to studying soil health, was now staring ahead like a child, witnessing a miracle for the very first time. He was trembling with pure excitement, without using a single scientific instrument.
He just took a deep breath, inhaling the rich plant essences wafting through the air. Then he knelt down and reverently scooped up a handful of the dark brown soil, sensing the vibrant pulse of life within it.
This is perfect nitrodonase activity.
Flawless heavy metal degradation. An absolute, perfect microecological balance.
Tears welled up in Elder Qi's eyes. Tears of joy streamed down his deeply wrinkled face. In my lifetime, he choked out. I never thought that in my lifetime I would actually see this kind of soil restoration technology, which we thought only existed in theoretical models. He stood up, bypassed all the high-ranking officials in his entourage,
And walked straight up to me. This highly revered national treasure actually bowed deeply to me. A young man covered head to toe in dirt.
康马林康
On behalf of the entire nation, I thank you.
I didn't react with the typical shock or flattery most people would show. Instead, I calmly reached out and gently helped the old man up.
For the path of pursuing scientific truth, I said softly.
We are the same kind of people. There is no need for formalities between us. Elder Qi stood up straight. His confidential secretary immediately stepped forward and handed him a metal briefcase stamped with a top-secret seal.
Lin Cong, Elder Qi began.
Those people outside think you've just come up with some clever formula to keep produce fresh and make a quick buck.
But we know the true value of what you hold in your hands.
He opened the briefcase.
Inside was a deeply alarming report. Decades of intensive chemical farming,
Combined with toxic industrial runoff, had left nearly 30% of our nation's core agricultural land severely contaminated with heavy metals and facing extreme soil compaction. Our soil is literally dying. If this continues, Elder Qi said, within 10 years, we will face an irreversible ecological disaster and a devastating national food crisis. He grabbed my hands, holding them tightly. His eyes burned like a blazing torch. The microecological matrix you've built on this toxic wasteland doesn't just grow delicious tomatoes. It is the only cure, the absolute antidote to reverse the death of our soil. The country needs you. The very land that birthed and raised us needs you.
I looked at the pure, unwavering light shining in Elder Qi's old eyes. A light completely dedicated to his country and his people.
For the first time, my cold, lifeless heart felt a flicker of human warmth. A burning spark. I've waited for this day for a very long time. I turned around and walked back into my drafty, rundown surveillance room.
From beneath a dust-covered computer tower, I pulled out a solid-state drive locked behind multiple physical encryptions.
Along with it, a thick stack of blueprints that I had spent nearly 10,000 days and nights calculating and printing. I walked outside.
With deep solemnity, I placed the physical heart and soul of my life's work into Elder Qi's hands.
Printed in bold, stark letters on the cover of the folder was National Arable Land Microecological Restoration and Leyline Revitalization Project Proposal. This wasn't just a proposal. This was the source code to launch a whole new era. I looked at Elder Qi. My voice was steady and resolute. Starting from the 30 acres of toxic land in this orchard, the computing power and symbiotic fungi of the matrix will spread endlessly through the underground water networks. Give me 5 years. At national-level supercomputer clusters paired with my seed stock, we will rewrite the laws of life across all 9,600,000 square kilometers of our country's land. Elder Qi's hands trembled as he took the unimaginably heavy proposal. Behind him, the provincial leaders and top experts stood in solemn silence. A wild, passionate hope burned in their eyes. Good, good, a true national treasure. Elder Qi repeated the word, good, 3 times over, his voice shaking with emotion. From this day on, you are the supreme technical commander of this national strategic project. Every resource, all computing power, every policy will give you a green light. Everything is yours.
I nodded.
I didn't say another word. A few days later, the military took full control of the abandoned orchard and the surrounding area. Construction began on ultra-high-spec, national-level underground supercomputing centers and fungal cultivation bases.
Yet, I still wore my mud-stained work clothes.
I stood at the highest point of the orchard, watching rows of specialized engineering vehicles, upgraded with our micro-ecological technology, drive toward the barren, salty wastelands in the distance. The wind swept across the vast land, carrying the fresh, sweet scent of soil coming back to life.
Shanghai and his greedy capitalist games had already been crushed like dust, completely swept away and forgotten by the unstoppable tide of history.
Starting from a bankrupt supermarket that was kicked out of the market, and using this 30-acre plot of isolated land as my chessboard, I've finally pushed my microscopic universe to dominate global livelihoods and reshape China's land veins, embarking on a journey to the Sea of Stars. The true creator never fights with ants for food. My journey has only just begun.